Hello and welcome to another episode of the Esther Krakue Show. Today I'm joined by Andrea Jenkyns, a Conservative MP who won the seat off of Ed Balls in the 2015 election. She is a staunch Brexiteer and a small C Conservative. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Hi there. Why small C Conservative?
Ooh, that's a very good question. So why are you Conservative then? And then we'll.
Why am I Conservative?
Yep.
Well, I was brought up, my dad used to say to me, besides dream big and dare to fail, he used to say it doesn't matter where you come from in life, it's what you do in life that matters. And that was probably been my moral compass throughout life, trying to do stuff to help people. My sisters are the same. And I think as a Conservative, you must get out there and really try to make your mark in life, and try and do something tangible which you can, leave for future generations if possible.
So what are, the core Conservative values for you? When someone says they're Conservative.
Yes. I'm very pro-business because to me, we should be the country of supporting SMEs. My constituency, we've got so many small businesses as well. And because, the impact on the economy, providing jobs. I'm big on social mobility, that's a big passion of mine. And I think also being a Conservative, I think it's about not only supporting those in life who can't help themselves, but we need to make sure if you can, you do.
You do.
Yes.
So what do you think are sort of the common misconceptions of Conservatives in
I still get it on the doorstep up north in my seat. Tory toffs. I sort of get sick of that actually because, my dad was a lorry driver. I started off at Greg's Bakery at 16 and I don't care about someone's background. I don't care if the whole cabinet was public educated. To me, it's about what you do in life that matters. And so I think as Conservatives, we're quite a broad church and it's just important that we speak our mind and
So what got you into politics and, first involved in politics?
What got me first involved in politics? I moved to Lincolnshire and I was a vocal coach and I was a musical theatre director of two children's performing art academies, putting on Les Mis and lots of other shows. And I sort of moved to Boston, Lincolnshire, which is a massive Leave seat as well. Yeah. And my landlord was involved in a local council by-election because I rented somewhere, so I found somewhere to buy. Helped him out the campaign trail, joined the party, and I was happy just at that local level. I had my pop rock band at the time. I was actually probably the only vegan Tory. I had red rubber trousers because I wouldn't wear leather, and spiky blonde hair because that was in my poppy rocky star days.
The alternative Conservative.
And so it was then I really got involved and I stood as a local councillor in a seat what had always been Labour, won the seat. But it wasn't until I lost my dad, actually, through mistakes in the NHS, I thought, right, I want to really influence health policy. So I literally sold my house, gave up my job, moved in with my mum so I could afford to be a candidate for 2 years.
And, so true
and
passion
just
project.
Concentrated on winning the seat of Morley and Outward.
Oh, right, okay. And I mean, everyone knows where we're at now. 3 years after Brexit, we're still sort of having this ridiculous debate. I mean, the Parliament is looking like a complete mess right now.
I mean, I was doing telephone canvassing yesterday in Conservative HQ, and a constituent said to me, "It's a rotten Remain Parliament."
Yeah.
And I think that
sums it up.
True spoken word. It's. At the moment, we've got parliamentarians who arrogantly think they know better than their constituents. And this is why I want an election. I mean, I've got a marginal seat, I've got a lot of risk, but I think the only way to settle this is have an election. Let's see if Jeremy Corbyn really is right.
Wants an election.
No, let's see if he's really right. He thinks that the people don't want Brexit anymore. He thinks that, we want to tie closer to the EU, or do they want to support Boris and the Conservatives who want to get us out? I think put it to the electorate.
I mean, how do you think we got here? How do you think we got to even just the Brexit vote? How do you think we got to the point where MPs are telling us actually this is not what you voted for?
Well, I was involved in the Leave campaign for the 52 constituencies in Yorkshire as a volunteer. I was their MP coordinator, and what I was hearing on the doorstep time and time again was it's forgotten communities, really, where people felt that they haven't had a voice for years. And I remember this one particular guy who said to me, you know, I've never voted in my life. He's my age, about 45, and he said, I'm going to go out and vote to leave in this referendum. I mean, that's big things, you know, someone casting their vote for the first time. And this is why it's so important now we deliver, because, you know, to ignore that in society, it's so anti-democratic and we are letting society down. So this is why I've been so outspoken and really trying to stand up for people who voted to leave. Now, your question, why are we in this situation? David Cameron obviously left. It went wrong with the leadership election. Theresa May ended up being Prime Minister, and I always said at the time, I didn't support Theresa May at the time because I always said at the time that only a Brexiteer can deliver Brexit.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got to truly believe in something, and then you'll passionately fight for it. And Boris was a big name on the Leave campaign. I supported him last time when he was standing against Theresa May before he stepped down from the leadership campaign. And so we've seen. We're at this situation today, as I said earlier, because the arrogance of some of my colleagues and some MPs who think they know better than the people who put them there. You know, I honestly believe that, you know, people didn't think that as a country we'd vote to leave.
Yeah.
So it's a shock to their system.
It's a shock to the system, and we've spent sort of 3 years trying to fight it.
Absolutely.
I mean, where do you think we're going to go now? Because I think most people in this country are just thinking, you know, we've had 3 years, even if you voted to remain, you've had 3 years to sort of digest it and sort of, you know, get it in your system. What now? What do you think the country should expect?
Well, I think views have hardened even more towards Brexit now because, you know, the arrogance of the EU, our poor negotiating skills under Theresa May's premiership. It'd be interesting to contrast, you know, both of their styles as well. And so I think it's actually hardened. Now, Boris has got a really tough job. Because Theresa May's government, there was no discipline. And it was really a free-for-all. You know, he was getting ministers and secretary of states who was voting against the government, and actually no discipline, no place of consequence for doing that. Yeah. And so Boris has come along and he's got a tough job. So, you know, he quite rightly so said to the 21 who...
cracked the whip.
Yeah. I mean, I voted against the withdrawal agreement 3 times. I've been a loyal Conservative to that point, but, you know, anything Brexit related, you know, I've been standing up for my constituents. And but it was different what they did. You know, what they was literally doing was handing, you know, the control of Parliament to Jeremy Corbyn. Okay. And what Conservative could do that? And so they was warned, and I think that, you know, Boris, as the new Prime Minister, as the new leader of the party, he had to crack that whip. He had to instill discipline.
What do you think that says, sort of, these 21 MPs and just what's going on in Parliament right now? What do you think that says about the state of democracy in the UK?
I think if you look at both parties, look at how many reshuffles the Labour Party's had. Look how many people's left their front shadow bench. You know, they've probably lost as many of their shadow ministers as we have as Conservatives. And they change their policy every other week. You know, I mean...
we still don't know where they stand, really, Labour, in terms of Brexit.
Completely. Corbyn was a Brexiteer. He felt the pressure of his party to then come out for Remain. Yeah. Look at what Emily Thornberry was saying, that she'd negotiate a deal, then the next minute she'd vote against it.
Or campaign against her own deal.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just crazy at the moment. And it is a shambles. It is a rotten Parliament. And the only way to solve this is let's put it to the electorate. You know, if they could look at their MPs, has that MP served you know, my constituents' views well, or have I blatantly been ignored? I think we need to put it back to the British public.
I mean, you won sort of kind of a, well, what was a Labour seat, and you turned it, you know, Conservative. On the issue of Brexit, do you think it's a divide between sort of, you know, Labour or Conservative, or do you think it's a sort of a working class versus elitist divide? Where do you think sort of the British public are now split in terms of Brexit, and how is that reflected in your own election? And
I mean, my seat was Labour for 85 years. I've only got one Conservative councillor in the whole constituency, and you know, it's an ex-mining part of the constituency. It's ex-mill owners, and it's a very working class constituency. I'm very well suited. It's very much, my background, down to earth, speak as you find Yorkshire, which speaks to my heart. And regarding Brexit, as I said earlier, it is these forgotten communities. I mean, for so long, I call it the Westminster elite because that's how politics has been. It's been very London-centric. And I have to say, George Osborne and David Cameron, they did care about the North. In my campaign, I got David Cameron and George Osborne up 7 times in the last 12 months in the lead up to 2015. But they also, look at the Northern Powerhouse. I mean, that laid quite dormant actually under Theresa May. And so I did feel that they started to care about the North. I know that Boris does. He was up in my constituency recently. But it crosses party lines. In these working class northern constituencies, they're very much Brexit. In these Labour heartlands up north and in the Midlands, it's very much Brexit. So it does cross party boundaries because when I'm on the doorstep and when I was on the doorstep in the Leave campaign, people was telling me, it's about our sovereignty. Yeah. It's about us charting our own way as a country in life and not being told what to do by the EU. And I completely agree. I
mean, this is the ironic, part of this whole debate. Labour is meant to be the home of the working class, for the party of the many, not the few. And even though many sort of Labour constituencies voted to leave the European Union, it's been the Labour Party mostly that's been, and the Lib Dems that have been fighting sort of Brexit at every level. So that in itself is just. It's really ironic, and it makes you think, why would you want a general election now? Why would you want to sort of be held accountable to that? But
that's why Jeremy Corbyn doesn't.
Exactly, chlorinated chicken. But on the point of Boris, how do you think sort of Boris has, rebranded the Conservative Party? Because it didn't really have a brand under May. No. It was just sort of trying to coast along and get through this.
I think under May it was very much the party of women, the party of giving people labels in a way, and that's not me. I mean, I remember writing an article for one of the national newspapers, a bit of an anti-feminist article to me, because to me social mobility is my passion. We should live in a meritocracy. I wouldn't care if the whole cabinet's men, as long as people are doing their jobs. Yeah. And to me, we shouldn't look at at people's background, who they love, their ethnicity. It should actually be who's capable. Yeah. Those who can, who's got that potential in life. And I think we should be the party of that. Yeah. And under Theresa May, there was a lot of tokenism, promoting all these young women whips at a time when we had a minority government, and actually we needed the old guard in there with experience to get us through those difficult votes. And I'm not saying anything about these women colleagues, because there's some really great ones, but there's really great men. I'm not anti-women. I'm a woman myself. I just want complete fairness, actually. And so where talent can race through the ranks, no matter what your background, that's what I can. And with Boris, he really cares about social mobility, and even though he comes, from more middle stroke upper class background, he actually is a person who cares about reaching these in society and giving them a better start in their life. This is why he wants to invest in education, because he realises the way to give people a better start in life and lift them out of their circumstances is education. Yeah. So I think that once Brexit's out the way, you will see some really great policies coming from Boris. We've already seen him now investing in policing, investing in education. And to me, I think we'll start seeing some true Conservative policies coming through.
I mean, this is something that I faced as a young sort of black Conservative. It's not actual social progress unless the people in Boris's cabinet are left wing or they agree with sort of left wing ideology. Yeah. It's not progress unless they think like us, and it's not if they look like us, which has been sort of something that's really been frustrating for me as a Conservative. Definitely. But I mean, sort of looking past Brexit and sort of the future of the UK, how do you think, or what do you think is the best way to get more young people involved in politics and even becoming Conservative? What do you think is sort of the best way to encourage?
I think we actually need more honesty in politicians, because when you just hear out people trotting the party line, which is well rehearsed, I mean, you've got to, you have got to have collective responsibility. I'm all for that. But I think people want to actually, I know it's cliche, but see real people in their politicians, something they relate to. And that's why I think it's good people of all backgrounds. It doesn't matter, what your background is, if you've got that ability. I'm not a fan of John Major's stance on Brexit, but, a working class guy who didn't go to university, who did a correspondence course, who became Chancellor and Prime Minister, that is, and look at Margaret Thatcher, we've got, if we look at the Yorkshire Conservative MPs, they're all a real mixture of backgrounds, and I think that's important, that we have normal people in politics. But I also think that it's about policies. We need, I've come up with a slogan, we need a social mobility housing policy. It's so hard for people to own their own home now and save up that deposit. I know the government's done stuff like Help to Buy, but my understanding is that the average income of people who signed up to Help to Buy is around 60,000. My constituents earn around 20,000 as an average, so it's hard for them to get on the ladder. So I think if we come up with a social mobility housing policy, it doesn't matter if you're in the private renter sector or social housing. Private renter sector, they pay higher rents. There's a mechanism there to help people to own their own homes. That's number one. The other thing is as well, there's a route for people that when they leave school, it doesn't matter whether it's an apprentice or these new T-levels, it's not just about academia. Academia, not everyone's academic. I wasn't. I went to university when I was 40 to get my degree while I was fighting the sea. I wasn't academic as I was growing up. But making sure that, I think we need to remove the snobbery of higher education. And I think we also need to open
and the price tag, that'd be nice.
But we also need to open up higher education with a bit more flexibility. So, mature students can actually access it more. And what about if somebody has time off to have a baby, or they've got bereavement in the family where they can pick it up and then start it again later? I think we need a bit more flexibility in the education system. And also, we do need to make sure that our politicians are out there on the street and engaging with people. I think that's how we actually get people involved in politics at a young age.
This is the last question because I am genuinely curious to know your thoughts on this. Young people in Britain have sort of become sort of the left sweet spot. The last general election, Jeremy Corbyn won a lot of young people just, by sort of talking the language of the lefty, I call it. How do you think Brexit will be good for young people in this country? And how do you think that will sort of bring them to actually opening up their sort of political leanings, even if it's not necessarily sort of conservative?
Well, before I answer that, let's talk about why a lot of young people are more to the left. Let's look at the higher education system. How many Conservatives do you actually get teaching? I know when I was at university as a mature student, there was only one Conservative lecturer, and the biasness in what people were teaching and how it was frowned upon to be Conservative, even as a mature student. And so we felt a bit like a lone voice. That's why I think it's great what you're doing to try and make sure, the Conservatives have a voice really, especially at such a young age, and that they are supported. Before I answer your question about Brexit and young people, I have young people helping on my campaign from universities, and one particular guy said to me that he waited a few months to actually come out as being a Conservative because he shared a house with some Labour people, some Momentum activists, and it was making his life really difficult. And that's so sad. I think that the left are not very actually forgiving if you haven't got the same views, and that's not a good place to be in a society. So what opportunity will Brexit have? Well, I get so many young people saying to me, what about investment in education, higher education and university funding when post-Brexit? But I say to people that it's our money. We're just cutting out the middleman of the EU, and we can invest it actually where we want to invest it. So that's number one. And investing our money into apprenticeships, invest our money in education, into actually better career advice in schools. Career advice has never been good. And that's a start, really. Post-Brexit, we can start investing in our own economy, our own people, and let's make sure that, you know, the future entrepreneurs, you know, those sparks that we see in young people who you know, it's so techy now, it's beyond, you know, a lot of my capabilities, what young people could do. I mean, my little 2.5-year-old son, the way he's worked out how to use my phone, it's amazing, really. So we need to make sure we invest in tech as well, in those industries, in STEM skills, and we really make sure that the economy is strong, so our next generations, you know, have got a better future ahead. And so post-Brexit, you know, without the constraints of the EU, where we can actually do free trade agreements with whoever we want in life.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, just going off a slight tangent regarding Brexit, I was in Kenya a couple of years ago, because global health issues matter to me, and what we find there is a child dies every couple of minutes of malaria.
Yeah.
And to me, we know that it's quite a corrupt government there. We give international aid, but what better way to lift people out of poverty to do free trade agreements with them? We can't, because of the common agricultural cap with the EU. And that's not good. So post-Brexit, you know, imagine being able to, you know, help trade with them and you know, help lift them up for a better start in life as well.
Yeah. So we like to end, you know, every episode with some quick fire questions. Don't think too much about it. I'll just, you know,
is some quirky ones? I like quirky ones.
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, you ready? Okay. Cornwall or Magaluf?
Yorkshire.
Okay.
I'm a Yorkshire.
That's not an option.
I'm a Yorkshire lass, you know, the Yorkshire Dales, even going Robin Hood's Bay in Yorkshire. Yeah,
all right, okay.
I'm a Yorkshire lass.
We'll go with Cornwall. Okay, roast dinner or tapas?
Veggie roast dinner. I love my Yorkshire pudding.
Oh gosh, I can't remember. What does a veggie roast dinner even look like?
But also, my favourite food is actually tofu.
Oh, right, okay. All right, sparkling wine or champagne?
I actually don't really drink much.
Right.
My dad was the same. If I have a glass of wine, I get pins and needles in my cheeks.
Really?
Low alcohol tolerance level. But if I had to choose, probably champagne.
Yeah, just a little bubbly. Just have some fun. All right, Land Rover or BMW? That's really bougie.
Well, I had a bright green Beetle for years, so I like quirky cars, in all honesty. So maybe Land Rover.
Yeah, we'll go with Land Rover. All right then, thank you very much for coming onto the show, Andrea. It's been a pleasure having you.
It's great talking to you, Esther.
Thank you very much.
You.
Yay.
Brilliant.